Chapter 13. Trying not to panic, Andorn looked for more tracks. He was confident the creature they were trying to follow had gone this way, but there were so many overlaid hobgoblin tracks, and the ground was so much more firm that tracking further was proving difficult. Behind him, Mira and the others had sat down in the shade of a tree, resting for a moment and discussing light-hearted subjects in low tones. As Saria came up to join him, her eyes also scanning the area, Andorn pointed to what he thought was the last track he could see. It was the heel indent, the rest of the foot obscured or never pushed into soft enough ground in the first place. When she also didn't move for ages, unable to see the next track either, Andorn stood up. Perhaps they would have to search further out and hope that a foot strayed to some softer ground somewhere not too far away, but he was wary of pinning too much hope to it. The tracks had already been growing faint, some not appearing at all, for the hobgoblins had made it worse. 10 minutes later, neither he nor Saria had found anything conclusive or that gave him confidence on the direction the creature had gone next. He was just about to suggest they try going out a little farther and looking again when Mira got up and came closer. "Why don't you get Ulfr to try and follow Kiana's scent?" Mira said. "We've got that pillowcase still." Saria looked her way, frowning, her head tilted to the side. "We don't know Kiana came this way, and we're trying to track the creature right now," Andorn said, not sure he wanted to change target when there was something clearly deadly out in the forest with them. "I know," Mira replied, "but if the hobgoblin fella had the priest's knapsack and holy book, then there's a good chance the priest ran into the creature as well. And where the priest is, so is Kiana, I reckon. Don't think that beast will be hard to find after that, and we've got no better option right now." Andorn sighed, but nodded. Mira had a point. It seemed Saria agreed, the young elf already reaching for her bag and pulling out the wrapped item. Ulfr was already by her feet, looking at it expectantly by the time she had it unwrapped. "Can you find her?" Saria asked Ulfr, holding out the pillowcase. Ulfr sniffed at it for a moment before he thumped his tail a couple of times on the ground, almost saying he was pleased. Then he got up and began sniffing the area, wagging his tail back and forth like a regular dog. He growled a few times, the hairs on the back of his neck still standing up a little, but after a few moments of sniffing here and there, his head went lower and he began to move in a straight line. "Wow, that actually worked," Jarlan said, as Ulfr started to move off in a mostly straight line. It had been Andorn's best guess for a direction from there, but Andorn didn't voice this last part. Instead, they all moved off after Ulfr. Saria stuck closer to her wolf than Andorn would have liked, her attention more on her companion than the surroundings. Thankfully, Thorgrim notched a bolt to his crossbow and brought up the rear, leaving Andorn to follow Saria, one hand near the hilt of a dagger and his eyes looking for more signs of tracks. Had Kiana truly been out here with the priest? If so, where was the carriage? What had happened to it? And why had the hobgoblins had the priest's belongings? They hadn't gone much farther when Andorn spotted more tracks, some of them human and booted, others the creatures, and even some hobgoblin ones heading back the way they'd come. "The carriage!" Saria suddenly blurted out, putting on some speed as Ulfr rushed up to it. The carriage was broken, 2 wheels on this side entirely smashed, and the door off its hinges. Deep claw marks rent the side and the fabric of the interior. There was no sign of the horse which usually pulled it. The reins frayed and snapped as if a horse had been there, but had broken free when the carriage crashed. "Well, some big creature's still out there then," Jarlan said, serious and a little wide-eyed. Even Mira didn't look thrilled at meeting whatever could have caused so much damage. While Ulfr continued to sniff at the ground, Andorn crouched and tried to study the tracks, but Saria was already doing it.
"The hobgoblin tracks are on top," she said. "I think they must have looted the carriage afterwards, and the horse has bolted off in the opposite direction."
Andor nodded his agreement.
"There's no blood,"
Thorgrim added from inside the carriage.
"Whatever attacked them, it didn't hurt either of them."
"But it has prevented them from going any further," Mira said.
Where were they even trying to go? Yarlin looked back where the carriage must have come from. There was a vague sort of path shaped through the trees. It wasn't more than an old dirt track that had been reclaimed by time and nature. But Andorn had a feeling it was meant to lead somewhere. Moving slowly around the front of the carriage, Andorn found the booted feet he'd seen earlier. There was a single set, running towards the mountains. Beside it was the creature, also running. But where was Kiana? Was the priest carrying her, or helping her run so her feet were too light to leave a mark? Andorn didn't know the answer to these questions either, but it was clear the person they'd looked for and the creature were definitely in the same direction. Given how long ago the priest had left the town and what the creature had been doing the last few nights, it made Andorn wonder what they'd find. He was already losing hope that they would find the missing pair alive. But either way, they needed answers, and Ulfr clearly thought he could smell Kiana still. The wolf quickly came to Andorn's side and then past him, nose still near the ground. "This way," Andorn called, making sure the others were still following. Saria came quickly again, still hurrying after Ulfr, and Andorn did his best to keep up with them both. He heard rather than saw the others coming along too. Yarlin incapable of being quiet at the best of times, and Mira not even trying. Their only hope would be to overwhelm whatever they came across, but nothing scary loomed ahead, and Andorn could only see the two sets of tracks he had always seen. As they carried on, Andorn began to hear the gentle sound of water, some bubbling along merrily off to their left. Not much farther again, a slight roar appeared too, the noise of a small waterfall or something similar. At last, they reached a small clearing. There, Ulfr paused, meandering back and forth for a moment, but Saria was no longer paying him any attention. Her eyes were locked on a small cave opening in the rock face. It had been obscured by the trees and the mountain until they were this close to it. It sat beside a stream that tumbled down a small cliff into a pool before trickling away almost silently in comparison. More footprints were obvious by the side of this pool, the priest's boots stopping here more than once, probably to drink. But there were also more of the creature's prints, and for the first time, Andorn thought he could see the smaller boots of another's feet.
"Kiana's?"
Saria asked, also spotting one. Hopefully. Andorn looked to the cave entrance next. The ground in front of it was churned up, as if someone had passed through many times, no single prints now clear. Pulling a small torch and tinderbox from his bag, Yarlin tried to light the entranceway for them. "Weapons at the ready," Andorn said, taking the light in one hand and holding his sword in the other. Saria once more readied her bow, and even Mira gripped her quarterstaff. Yarlin drew his own weapon last, but opted to go first. Ulfr now beside him, still sniffing. Dread filled Andorn. Despite the comfort he had taken from the priest clearly having drunk from the pond and moving around more, the priest was unlikely to do that while the creature roamed close by. But the man of the cloth had chosen to bring his carriage this way for a reason. Had the priest been here before? There was only one way to find answers. Press on and hope for the best. But Andorn wasn't about to rush into danger either. Listening and looking ahead, Andorn stuck close behind Ulfr, Saria also nearby. The air grew more chill as they went deeper, making Andorn grateful for the cloak that always hung at his back. But Saria clearly shivered, and even Yarlin's grip began to shake on his sword. Deeper they went. Ulfr guiding them at several split pathways and through a smaller gap where they had to all crouch for a few meters. Eventually, Ulfr let out a little growl and paused, the wolf suddenly cautious, looking to them before a particular bend in the path. Andorn slowly moved past them all, holding the light and trying to remain calm. After a brief pause, he strode quickly around the corner. Less than a second later, he was confronted by a large room that appeared to be a dead end, and to one side of the room, chained to the wall, was a woman. She blinked rapidly, her arm up to shield her face from the light while she looked away.
"Kiana?"
Saria asked, slowly approaching the woman sitting up against the edge. She looked up as she heard her name.
"How do you know me?"
she asked, her voice soft, more curious than frightened.
"Your brother Bernard sent us."
Saria continued closer, but Andorn hung back, studying the cavern. It was naturally made, but barely lit by the smallest of candles in one corner. Near that corner was another bedroll and a few more possessions. He also noticed the other end of her chain ran to a large, flat surface of rock, the other end driven into it on a spike. There were several holes, as if the attempt to secure it had failed before it had found purchase.
"Is the priest here with you?" Andorn asked. "And have you been attacked by a large creature? The farmers have asked us to kill it." "John has gone to try and get some food," she said. "And the beast?" Saria asked. "We saw what it did to the carriage," Mira added, offering the shivering woman a blanket. "You must be terrified." Yes."
There was a moment of silence as Yarlin went over to the other end of the chain as well and looked over the wall. He gave it a tug before looking to her again. It was clear that he was equally suspicious about all this.
"The priest,
Kiana trailed off as she pointed at the chain.
"So he did abduct you from the butler's house," Mira exclaimed. "You poor thing. Come, let us get you safe." "I don't know when he'll be back," she said, "but he has the key with him. How did you find me?" "Bernard told us he had heard a carriage, and we traced the carriage along this road. The wolf did the rest. We were also tracking a large beast of some kind." "It's not here," Kiana replied, getting Andorn's attention again. Was she telling them everything? She sounded worried. But if the priest had really taken her, then it could be a natural fear for her own safety. But that meant something had convinced her to keep quiet at the inn after all. Either way, Yarlin tugged on the end of the chain, clearly trying to get it out of the wall.
"If there's truly a beast out there, I'm not sure we should wait," he said.
"No, we shouldn't," Mira added before looking at Andorn. "Can you help?"
Andorn hesitated for a moment, wishing he could have the answers to his questions before he needed to act, but Yarlin was right. They'd said they'd find the beast as well, but they couldn't leave Kiana here or wait for the priest to come back. Picking up the small cloak the priest had been using as a pillow, Andorn tucked it into his bag. He then went over to the chain around Kiana's leg. "Hold still," he said, bending to get a better angle. A moment later, he had his lockpicks out and was working on the mechanism. Within seconds, it clicked to let him know he'd got it right.
"Thank you," she said. "We should go."
Mira nodded and took her hand so she wouldn't get lost in the dark, and then the group moved back to the entrance. Andorn still held the torch, so he hurried quickly after. Something wasn't right about this, but he couldn't put his finger on what. He knew Mira had always suspected that Kiana had been taken, but the reason why had puzzled Andorn, and they were still no wiser.